If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And please join me on my website at nanice.com. Thank you.
It's your time for Chai with Nanice. Get ready for substance, clarity, change, and especially empowerment. Get ready to turn over stones, uncover stories, and get to the heart of the matter in every area of your life. Any mood runs, any emotion flies, and your dreams are within your grasp. There are no limits or boundaries, and your comfort zone is out of reach, yet it's the safest place you will ever be. Come in, sit down, and have some chai with Nanice.
Welcome to Chai with Nanice. I'm Nanice. We are living in a time of great awakening. This means that we are remembering who we really are. We are unpeeling the layers, taking off the veils, and finally waking up to live our lives. A key element in this process is forgiveness. And this means different things to different people. But I do know that whatever you haven't forgiven in your life, whether it's with yourself or with someone else, it will stop you and hinder you from awakening. You see, if we are in denial, which is what happens when we refuse to give forgiveness, then we get stuck. And if we are stuck, then we can't evolve into who we really are. And this is the key to living our greatest and most divine lives. So today, I'd like you to sit back and maybe think of some things that you would like to forgive in your life. And maybe it's something that you did and it's time to forgive yourself. Or maybe something was done to you and it's time to forgive another. And we're not just talking about any forgiveness today. We're talking about forgiving the unforgivable. Yes, forgiving the unforgivable. And I'm sure that a lot of people out there think, well, there's certain things you can forgive, but there's other things, they're just not forgivable. But what if everything really was forgivable? What would happen if we really dropped those defenses and we saw each other as innocent and we saw each other as just wanting to be loved? What would happen if we really could forgive anyone for anything? How free would that make you? How free do you want to be? So today we are going to talk about just this. Forgiving the unforgivable, the art of compassion. And today, my beautiful guest is Rebecca Moulton, and Rebecca has quite a story to share with you. And you'll understand why she and I are having this conversation today in just a few minutes. So, now that you have all your little list of to forgives in your mind, let's begin. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, too. It's an honor.
Yes. So I would like to mention to our listeners how this show actually came about. Right? Okay. So, what was it, a couple of months ago? Was it a couple of months ago? Yeah. So Rebecca came to my house, and my 11-month-old puppy attacked her. Right? Literally, he had never done anything like this before, and he jumped up and he bit her nose. She wasn't in the door for 10 seconds. And there's the nose is swollen, there's blood dripping everywhere. She's in shock. And of course, I felt so bad. Well, we stopped the bleeding, and we discussed it. And I looked at her, and I could tell that she had no bad feelings towards me or towards Neo, my puppy. None at all. And I just thought that was remarkable. And then we started talking about some history that you have. And, a little more serious than, a dog biting you in the nose. And the thing that impresses me most about you is that the forgiveness is so easy. A lot of times we have to talk ourselves into it, and that's not really forgiveness. But I could see that there's no negotiating with you. You just see people and dogs as innocent. Yeah. So, Rebecca, would you share a little bit about your story growing up and some of the things that have happened in your life?
Sure. I grew up in a family. I was born daughter of Dan Lafferty. I don't know if people are familiar with I'm sure people are, but with the Lafferty brother murder that took place in the 80s in Alpine, Utah. It was my sister-in-law and her baby were murdered by my father and his brother, Ron Lafferty. And I guess just to back up, growing up with my father before that incident, that happened when I was 6, growing up with him, it was scary. Looking back, when you're a child, you don't know anything different, but experiencing a lot of abuse and fear and not understanding why this is happening, but knowing that this is my family and these are the people that I love. And I remember lots of incidences where I was told to forgive or say I'm sorry to my brothers or sisters, and I remember feeling very soft in my heart, and it was easy to do because I loved my brothers and sisters very much. And times where my father would beat me, or I would just tell him that I loved him, just to soften it. And I knew that something in him was snapping, and if I could just tell him I loved him, it would snap him out of that trance, and it would get his attention.
Did that work?
And it worked.
Awesome.
It happened a couple times with different scenarios with different people, like my grandmother, and just if I would look them in the eyes and I told them that I loved them, and I felt it, I could change that fear into love, and something would come over me and the other person, and then like a reality would snap into us, and we'd it'd become peaceful, or at least the abuse would stop.
Yes. Yes. There were some pretty extreme incidents of abuse growing up. Would you like to share a couple of those?
One in particular I remember was probably being 2 years old and in my high chair, and because I could speak at a young age pretty clear and speak very fast, my father thought I was very intelligent and that I should understand saying thank you and please, and so to be let down from my high chair after eating, I needed to say thank you. But this particular time I wasn't understanding, or I didn't say it, and he left me in there pretty much all day, and I cried to get out, and I think at some point I fell asleep, and my mom had to leave because she had other things she had to do, and she hated him for this, but I think at one point feeling very confused and just saying something that he needing to know what to say. After I woke up, okay, what is it I need to say just to get out of the situation? It was survival.
Wow.
And I said, shoo. So it was close, and he let me out. Wow. So that was one incident. And then just being disciplined for probably my brother crying, and because I was crying, I would be beat again, and I wet my pants because I was terrified, and then I would get beat for that. And I was three, the most 3.
Yeah.
That sticks. Those 2 incidents stick out the most.
Yeah. And I recall that you and your mother and your siblings actually ran for your lives at one point. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. By the time I was 5 or 6, yes, we were living in a very condemned house. It should have been, condemned. It has been now. And my mom knew at that point my father was completely psychotic. She was an immigrant from Scotland, didn't have any family here. Finally realized that she was alone in this situation. She was defeated with the family. The Lafferty family was very dominating, not supportive of her decision to leave. And she knew she had to kind of start playing with his head, because he was very extreme with God and what God was telling him to do, which led into the murders. But before that, she realized she needed to get out. So she was telling him he needed to pray about us leaving. And at some point, he gave her the okay and said it felt right. And she picked us up within 10 minutes and had us out of the house. And somebody came, picked us up, and we were gone. And that was like I'm trying to think. I don't remember seeing my father until at least a year after that. Maybe one time he popped in, and my mom gave him some money and sent him on his way. And then I remember the police coming to pick us up and take us to a place where I was understanding what was going on, to take us away, because I found out later that my aunt had been found, and her baby, and her husband, which was my uncle, knew it was my father. And so the police were looking for them, and we were in safety. They kept us safe. But this all happened, and I was like, why would they be afraid of my dad? And it wasn't until later that I grasped the concept he probably could have been capable of killing anybody at that point, even me. Right. And if God said, he would have.
Yes.
And but that part of me still, like, that is my father, and I love him.
Yeah. So could you share a little bit about what happened with the murders?
Yeah. I guess the brothers had formed a school, this called the School of Prophets.
So your father
my
and
father
his
and his brother, and there was 4 other brothers that all did this. And this is in that book, Under the Banner of Heaven, if anyone's read that book. And I think it became so much of an ego thing for them that my father was given the name of, my Uncle Ron was the voice of God, where my father was the hand of God. I think that was the title he was given. So this was stuck in his mind. And my aunt that was murdered was the one that was outspoken. She was the youngest brother's wife, and she was the most outspoken, and said, "You guys are crazy. What are you talking about? All this conspiracy stuff." And she talked one of the wives into leaving Ron, the oldest brother, who was convicted with my father. Talked his wife into leaving him. And from that point, Ron had something against Brenda. And he said he had a prophecy. He received a prophecy from God, and it was that she was to be Brenda, and her seed would be removed. And there was another person of the church that was assisting in Ron's wife leaving him. So she was on the list as well. Well, this was very disturbing to the rest of the brothers when he presented this to them. And my father says, he still says that he remembers feeling very uneasy about it all, but knowing that God, when he asks you to do something, it never is easy, if it's worth it, so all these things playing out in his head, and his upbringing, finding out the way he was, raised with his father, it just also brought me to another level of compassion and understanding for the way his makeup would be, and the way he is, and So your father and his brother. So this was happening. I guess it was the 24th. July 24th, Pioneer Day, and the morning of, they went around the home to pick up a shotgun, I guess, some sort of gun, and Ron went in and started physically beating Brenda. He was taking out all of his anger and aggression on her. And in the book, it says some things they had repeated back and forth to each other. And I think she was terrified for her life. She knew dang well that they were coming for her when she saw that look in his eyes when she opened the door, because she tried to slam the door on him and lock it, and he busted in. And just, I guess my dad said when he walked in, her face was so badly beaten that he didn't really recognize her. But something clicked in him, and he thought he needed to become the hand of God. That was his role, needed to be played out at this moment. And that's when it kicked in, and he said he walked into the bedroom. He told Ron to leave, that he needed to finish, and that he took the baby's life first.
And how old was the baby?
She was 18 months. And she even called him Daddy, because he resembled her dad so much. And that part just really upsets me. And he slit the baby's throat. That's how, because in the Bible it's a symbolic way of they teach you that in the Mormon church, in the sacrifice, one of the temple ceremonies, anyways, from ear to ear. And then he finished Brenda, I guess, and I think she tried to apologize at some point and said, "I'm sorry," and he just, killed her anyways, I guess. And I just can't even imagine my uncle walking into that scene and seeing his family like that.
So your uncle, who was the husband and father?
Yes, was at work while this was happening.
Uh-huh.
And so after he was covered in blood and he left the scene,
Your father?
My father, they took off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's when they talked about what had taken place. And I think they were found the next morning and then arrested.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And in the meantime, my uncle comes home and sees that scene.
It must have been horrific. Your wife and your little baby. Oh. And to know that your brothers did it.
Nightmare.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so your father and your uncle are still in prison?
They're still in prison,
Yeah.
My father's been sentenced with two life sentences with no parole. Mm-hmm. Ron is on death row. Mm-hmm. So he's been sentenced with the death penalty. Mm-hmm. And I've always been in contact with my father. We did, right after the murders took place, my mom did take us to go visit him. Mm-hmm. And they allowed physical visitations with the kids and stuff. And so we'd go and talk. And after a while, they moved him, and then we weren't able to communicate. It was only through glass. And then my mom didn't want to take us back there anymore. She just, at some point, she's like, I don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so everyone in my family pretty much has cut off any kind of communication to him.
With your dad?
With my dad
uncle.
and my uncle,
yeah.
Absolutely.
But you haven't?
No.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, growing up and going to school and being around people in a small town, word travels and people know who you are. And when you're in a small community of church, people want to help. And so everybody knows everyone's business. And even though they're helpful, it feels like it's not so helpful sometimes. It feels kind of nosy and invasive. And like I felt like a spectacle. I felt like some sort of perverted entertainment on some level for some people. The kids I grew up with didn't grasp it as much as the parents did. And so when they found out that their child was hanging out with, Lafferty, then it was almost like forbidden. So I carried a lot of shame and confusion because this was my father. Yeah, he did these things, but this is still my father, and I felt very defensive and very, very, very hurt.
Wow. Yeah.
And imagine that people knew even if they didn't know. I just felt very exposed and very like there was something really wrong with me.
Yeah.
And so
you were very much directly affected and traumatized.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how do you get to the place where you do have a relationship with your father? Because you do have a relationship with him now, don't you?
Right.
Yeah. How did that come about?
It never really stopped. I had an imagination of what I wanted my father to be, and so I would write him all the time, and he would always write me back, and he would write in kind of like he was speaking in prophetic, and it never made sense to me, and it frustrated me, and I just would let it go in one ear and out the other, and take the bits of pieces that I wanted to hear, and then just kind of let the rest go, and collected his letters and would write to him about where I was coming from, because I wanted a father. My friends had fathers, and I just wanted that close connection that I felt when I was little with him again. That never returned in a physical way.
So how do you get to this place of just complete compassion for your father? I know that people are listening to us now, and they're wondering, well, how did that happen? How did she do that? Like, so what was that process? Or was it even a process?
I have always felt like a close connection with my father, so I can't say that that's ever gone away. There's a part of him that really, really scares me, and there's a part of him that's very, very innocent, and I've always seen that innocent part of him, like a little boy that wants so much just to do the right thing. And even though it sounds so bizarre, I've always sensed that from him. Right. And everything he taught me, he always taught me to listen to my inner guidance, and to pray. And with those two tools, I've always felt very close and trusting to the divine or to God or whoever, and always asking what's the best thing to do in this situation. And it always felt anything soft and loving was always the answer and always the key. Yeah. And
is that because it just naturally felt good?
It naturally
to be soft
felt
and loving?
Good. Yes.
Yeah.
And it felt good to defend him because regardless, he was my father still. Right. And he was my only father. Yeah. I didn't want any other father. Yeah. I wanted him. Yes. And I would write to him and draw, and I recognized things in him that were just brilliant. And I had part of those pieces, and so, and I knew he wasn't all bad. I knew he did these very bad things, and I think a lot of it I was in denial about as well, because I didn't really want to know the true details. But you do now, and I do now.
And I only have witnessed complete compassion, which is remarkable. It's remarkable. You know, that's for most people that doesn't come so natural. For most people, it's almost like they have to talk themselves into it, talk themselves out of the judgments, or maybe, you know, in a situation like this, I'm sure a lot of people would say, that's unforgivable. Right. That was horrific and unforgivable. Right. And so they don't even feel like they have to forgive. Right. But what happens to us when we don't forgive? You know, it's like, so we're holding on to that energy. Right. And it's really the same energy as in the person that we refuse to forgive. So it has to equal that. You know, the intensity has to equal that. So it's like if I say, I cannot forgive him because he did this horrible thing, I have to hold that same equivalent of energy in my body in order to hold that position. And, you know, we know enough about the body now, mind-body connection, that when we hold things back, when we, you know, hang on to things, when we judge, when we close down, that causes damage, and sometimes, you know, fatal damage to the body. And yet, for so many people, it just seems so much easier to hold it in and, you know, deal with the damage, whether they consciously or unconsciously, you know what that is. And a lot of people do. You know, I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and they were very aware that, you know, they had this problem or this ulcer or this, you know, whatever, because they haven't been able to let go or forgive something in the past. Right. And yet they still, you know, and you know, the gift in that, when we do have pain in the body, it's like, oh, okay, what is this really telling me? And then we get to pay attention to it. Right. Without the pain, we might not notice and might just go along. Pain is so much of our friend. Because it pushes us towards awakening. It pushes us towards who we really are. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It took layers to actually look at this, you know, and years to, and I even went to the place of wanting to really understand how my uncle felt. Yes. You know, with the loss of his wife and his baby. Yeah. And just letting myself even just go there. And it was so scary, and it was so painful. Oh. And then still come back and think, and I love my father for that. Wow. And what if that was my child? Oh. Yeah. And I remember watching a talk show when I was younger about a girl that had experienced severe physical and sexual abuse by her father, and she was on a talk show saying that she was forgiving, and the forgiveness was for her, not for her father, and that really touched me. Yeah. Yeah. And I realized that, you have to let go of those things that are for yourself and for others. Yeah. Yeah. And I hear you mention a key piece here, and that is that you had to find out the truth. Like you want, as hard and as difficult as it was, you had to look. You have to really look and say, okay, what really happened here? And I believe that without that, forgiveness is not possible. You know, if there's some denial, if there's some shadow, you know, some lurking dark monster in the closet, then we really don't have forgiveness. It's only when we really know what's happened, full disclosure,
that we can forgive.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never believed that God is a judging God. And I believe that Jesus was a real person, and I've always felt very close to Jesus. And I always try to think, what would Jesus do in this situation? And my heart always tells me it's to love and forgive.
Yeah. Yeah. Truly. Yeah, that's the Christ consciousness, to love and forgive. Yeah. And the funny thing about forgiveness is that when you really can see someone else as innocent, regardless of what they've done, there's nothing to forgive.
Right.
There's nothing to forgive.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. The trick is getting to that place. You know, how do you get to the place where you can see everyone is innocent?
Right.
And I think that it's so difficult is because we feel we have to protect ourselves. And so as long as, I'm judging you about whatever, then, I'm not letting you get close and I'm safe. It's the way we close our hearts, we protect ourselves. But to truly forgive someone, that means an open heart. You don't get forgiveness from a closed heart. Right. You don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I know a technique that I use, because I'm a dental assistant, so I work with the public, and people come in there, and it's easy to have judgments on them because they don't take care of their teeth or whatever, and you're around people all day that are constantly judging people for the way they are, and I started to see people as like they were like members of my family. They reminded me of my brother, like somebody I would feel connected to immediately because I felt like my brother, and I would soften towards this person, and my judgment would melt, and I would be able to understand just from a loving place, like they're doing the best they can.
Yes.
And all that harshness that I had towards that person just melted. And I felt love. And
what happened to them? Do you notice?
They felt touched, moved in some way when they left there. They said, "Thank you so much," and they thanked me, and I didn't even understand for why. It was all done on an unverbal energy, without any words.
That's very sweet. That's very sweet. Yeah.
And my listening changed for them, and I would listen with compassion.
Listening with compassion.
Yeah.
That really is the key, isn't it?
And people feel that.
And they do. They do. Because we are really tracking each other's energy, whether we realize it or not. A person can be, say the sweetest words, but if their energy is, otherwise, then we sense that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we want to shut off a little bit, That's the trick.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. A couple of days ago, I just really got on such a deeper level than I ever have, that I don't know what anyone else should do. I don't know what's better for you or better for anyone. I don't know.
Right.
I know for me, or maybe I don't even know for me, right? And I certainly don't know for anyone else. And I think that many of us go through our lives thinking we know better. We know better.
Right.
I know better. I know better than her. I know better than him. Yeah. And that's separation. So it's like, oh, I love my son so much, but I know what's better for him. That's separation.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a very good point. I think that was something I realized too. I don't know what my father's contract is with God.
Yes.
I honestly don't.
Right.
That is his sacred thing. And maybe there is some divine reason, as bizarre as it sounds, behind the whole thing.
Yes.
And I know, from what I know now with quantum physics, that we are creating our own creation right now.
Yes.
And I'm choosing to create something beautiful from that situation.
Yes.
Unconsciously I've been doing it, but now I'm consciously creating that.
And beautifully. Yeah. The Neil Donald Walsh story, the son and little soul and the son. Yeah. That says it all. And the way that goes. And in case some of our listeners haven't read that or heard about that. So there was a little boy soul. Now, I don't know if souls are little boys or little girls, but in the story it was. So the little boy soul, is up with God, and he goes to God one day, and he says, God, I want to learn about everything. And God said, oh, that's wonderful. What would you like to learn about first? And the little boy thought, and he said, I'd like to learn about forgiveness. And God said, that's a beautiful thing to learn about, but you're going to have somebody to forgive. Well, the little boy soul got very sad because he had no one to forgive. And just then a little girl soul popped up, and she said, I can help you. I'll give you something to forgive, right? And he said, you will? He goes, yeah. She says, but all we have to do is go down to that planet Earth, and we will forget each other, and one day we'll meet, and I'll do something so terrible to you, and then you'll have the opportunity to forgive me. And he looked at her, he said, you would do that for me? And she said, of course I would, because I love you. But she said, you're going to have to do something for me. And he said, anything, I'll do anything for you. She said, in order for me to do this horrible thing to you, I'm going to have to forget who I really am. And you're going to have to remember who you really are to help me wake up too. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And what I often do, especially when things don't seem so pretty on the surface, or don't make sense on the surface, or just is intolerable on the surface, I just ask God, divine source, show me a greater truth. Like show me what's really happening here. Right. And every single time, practically, what I'm shown, it gets reduced back to love. It really does. And I think that if we don't find love in any situations because we haven't looked deep enough, we haven't asked to be shown a greater truth, this is freedom.
Yeah.
This is freedom. Yeah. A huge healing takes place. As a coach, people come and they see me and they've got big dark secrets, and there's something just about revealing their secret, the thing that they're ashamed about, to somebody who just loves them and has no judgment. That in itself is completely healing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like the old confession, in the Catholic religion. It's the same thing. So it's like, oh, somebody's hearing me and not judging me. That's amazing.
What a beautiful gift. And you do that. And you've done that for me.
Thank you. That's easy. That's easy. Yeah. It's easy to love when you really choose love. It's easy to love when you really see into a person's soul and not just, what's on the surface. And, I learned that lesson with myself too, because there've been many things in my life that, I wasn't so proud of. But when I really look at myself, underneath, some of these things that I haven't been so proud of, what I see is just a really beautiful heart that always means well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes doesn't always, do as well as it means, but that's part of being human and part of learning. Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah. And it is hard to forgive ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it easier for you to forgive someone else than it is to forgive yourself?
Sometimes, and like you said, I just have got to come down to the place where what was my intention behind what I did.
Yeah.
And that was when I had the breakthrough of not judging myself.
Wow. Yeah. Just looking at the intention.
Absolutely.
Where was my heart?
Yes.
Where was my heart? And the funny thing is, I think if your heart is ill-willed, then you're just going to feel justified.
Right.
There's not even going to be a judgment there or guilt there. You're just going to feel justified. Well, I did, what I needed to do. Right. But the fact that there is a judgment there, it says that your intentions were likely good and loving.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's I know as I started off the show, this is an amazing time to live, and we were talking about that before the show too. Oh, it's such an amazing time. We are in this age of awakening. We're in the age of moving into the age of enlightenment, and things are accelerated now because we're moving quickly towards that. And I think that because of that, things that have been hidden in the past are coming to the surface. And that happens in relationships, in communities, in the government. You know, we're learning all these things that have gone on for, how many years, and we were completely oblivious and blind to them.
Right.
Especially in the government. Yes. And they come to the surface, and, oh, that's so awful. It's, Right. But truly, they have to come to the surface. They were going on anyway, whether we knew it or not.
Exactly.
And so now it seems like there's more and more and more, bad stuff in the world, but I don't believe that. What I think is really happening is that what was kept underground in secret is now being revealed.
Exactly.
And that's why it seems so tumultuous or challenging. And it's really the good news, because if things are coming to the surface, they clear.
Right.
And then we're free.
Right.
Yeah.
Bringing them to the light.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I agree.
Oh. Yeah. So, has there ever been a situation in your life that you haven't been able to forgive someone?
Yeah, I would say I've struggled probably the most with the one with my ex-husband, and trying to come to a place of forgiveness and stay loving, and still be strong for what matters to me, which is spending more time with my son,
right,
and seeing him,
and
having to deal with the restrictions that he's been able to put on me, or I've allowed him to put on me. And that was a whole other level of forgiveness that was revealed to me just over last week.
Oh, wow.
That I was, once it got so clear to me that I was not feeling worthy of the time that I wanted to spend with my son, that I was the one kind of playing small in the whole situation, out of trying to be loving and caring and forgiving of my ex-husband. I was playing small, and that wasn't loving myself.
No.
And it wasn't serving my son or my ex.
Right.
The moment that I knew, and I could feel in every cell of my being that I was going to be with my son, I could feel it, and it was coming from a place of only love for everyone.
Wow.
The universe conspired in my in my best interest, and the ball started rolling, and it got really clear to me that I was still being loving and forgiving, even though I was standing up and I was getting angry. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were standing up for yourself, you were getting angry,
and I was getting angry,
and yet you were still had compassion, and you were still in a state of forgiveness.
Yes.
Wow, how does that happen?
I don't know.
I don't know. It did.
It just did. And it was a lot of emotions at one time, and it was very clear and it was very exciting.
Yes.
And my power returned, and I felt so good to remember what that felt like again. And it was very clear that you can experience that all and it still be loving.
Yeah. Wow. That's profound. That truly is profound. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Because it appears to me that if we are not standing in our power, that it's almost impossible to forgive someone else.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
You can't because if you're feeling powerless, that means that you need to protect that sense of power that's so weak. And to forgive someone else would make you feel even more vulnerable. So there has to be this defense there to protect you.
Right.
Yeah. And I've noticed with myself and with many people I've worked with over the years that forgiveness is very much connected to a sense of worth.
Absolutely.
That if you don't feel worth it, if you don't feel worthy, you really can't forgive someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
You're coming from this place of like mercy and victimhood still, which kind of leaves it in their hand to forgive. And I've experienced that. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I played that dynamic out a lot, and it has to do with my worth. It comes back to me not feeling worthy in that situation.
Yeah. 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 So it's like, you don't feel worthy, so you have to make the other person wrong to keep that separation.
Exactly.
Because there's a direct correlation between how worthy we perceive ourselves and how open or closed our hearts are. Mm-hmm. So the less worthy you feel, the more closed your heart. The more worthy you feel, the more open your heart.
Right.
Yeah, and it's inescapable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you are always reminding me and everyone that we are already worth it. Mm-hmm. Just because we're who we are.
Right. Right.
And it's sometimes it's hard to fathom that, but when you step into that, and when I step into that, and I feel the truth of that, of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Of course. Of course. We've had amnesia.
Yes.
We've been brainwashed.
Yes.
That our worth is dependent on what we do, what we own, how we look, all those things. And that's ridiculous. And in fact, if our worth is based on those things, then it's not worth it all. It's not.
Because it can be taken away.
Mm-hmm. And will be.
And will.
Yeah, and it will be as a gift so that we have an opportunity to get in touch with our real worth and not just the illusion of worth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very connected to awakening as well. To awaken, there needs to be a sense of knowing who you are. And you can't know who you are from a state of worthlessness.
Right.
Yeah.
So I can see the gift in that situation now with my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. Our contract was for him. He was probably here to show me, remind me of my worth. Mm-hmm. And by him just giving in was not going to show me that.
Right.
I was not going to learn that way.
Right. You needed a strong opponent.
Absolutely.
For you to match that energy and find out your strength and to discover that, yes, you can be angry and you can stand your ground and still be completely loving and compassionate.
Right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. You said it.
That's a true goddess warrior right there.
Right. Yes. Totally. That is totally true. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I love that we got to this place because I think that a lot of people, when they think about, being forgiving and compassionate, there's a sense of like, oh, I have to give in or I have to give up something.
Right.
And that's not what it is at all.
Right.
Yeah. You in fact, you need to be yourself. You need to stand in your power to really have that experience of forgiving.
Right.
Yeah. 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 Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So, your dad, what does he think now about what happened all those years ago?
He went through a process himself of seeing himself as a little boy, watching himself doing what he did, and if God would ask him to do that. And he was able to come to the terms that God would not ask something of someone to do that to his innocent children, and that it was very hard for my father to really get to that place. And he wrote everyone asking for forgiveness, whether they would or not. Mm-hmm. It was huge for him to just come out and do that. So his own healing has taken place, and he's in a very peaceful place right now.
Wow. So he got to this place where he realized that what he did was wrong? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And then having to forgive himself for those acts that he'd caused. And I know that it still hits him at times.
Yeah.
And he suffered severe migraines, having to reconnect because he was so disassociated from it all. And then coming back to all those realizations and now realizing that he won't be with his children and what he's missed and hearing the sadness and the compassion and the sincerity in his voice and just the confusion, the poor man, all from coming from a place of wanting to do the right thing and getting so far off,
Yeah.
Far
so
out
how did he get to this place of self-forgiveness?
Surrender. Surrender, and there was a friend. We are friends now, but a woman that came into his life. She felt guided by the angels, and he came to her in a dream and said, "Help me." And she went and visited him in prison, and she actually helped him through the process of seeing himself as a little boy. She didn't understand why she was being guided to do this. she didn't have any other motive.
Wow.
And they're still in contact, and her and I are friends, and she's kind of moved on in her path now. And, but it was because of her.
Wow.
She played a very important
So this woman who didn't know
any of
you
right.
has a dream one night, and I know that the case had been in the newspapers all over. I lived in New York at the time, and I remember it. I didn't even live in Utah at that time. So she just has this random dream.
She has this random dream. And he comes to her and says, "I'm Dan Lafferty," and she had no, and
Oh, wow.
she's in her own world, and it's been years since the whole incident, and I come to find out all the pieces started to fit together when she looked him up on the internet. And she used to be she lived around the corner in that house that was condemned that we lived in right before.
Really?
Yeah. And she's my age, so she was a child and wasn't unaware of all that was going on at the time.
Wow. And
looks him up and finds out who he is, and feels even more compelled to go contact him, and not knowing what was going to happen. And
that's courageous.
Yes, very courageous. And she's been like an angel in his life.
Wow.
And she also played a part in bridging my father and I's healing and forgiveness and love for each other.
Yeah. What about the brother whose wife and baby was murdered? I mean, what?
My Uncle Alan.
Yeah. I mean, has he gotten to a place of forgiveness, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was another beautiful piece. Yeah. He went to see my father, and it had been so long that he didn't recognize him. He goes, "Do you know who I am?" He goes, "No." He goes, "I'm your baby brother, Alan." And he just broke down and cried. And my dad says, "Wow, I did not recognize you."
Wow.
And he says, "I want you to know I forgive you." And when he told me that, it was Christy that told me, the woman that had the dream about him. When she told me, I felt the forgiveness in my heart, and I just thought, what a beautiful thing.
How did your uncle get to that place? Do you know?
I would say a lot of praying, because he does believe in God, and he believes in the power of prayer.
Yeah. Wow. I'm truly forgiving the unforgivable. Wow. Yeah. It's a beautiful story. Yeah. Do you have any last words for our listeners today, Rebecca?
I think one of the most important things is for us to recognize when somebody is sharing their intimate story with us, and to listen from a place of non-judgment. It creates such freedom for that person in that moment, and it's healing.
Yeah.
And just I think it just helps them realize that or at least it helps me realize that there's nothing to judge. When I put myself in that person's place, I have more understanding of where they're coming from, and that we're really all just trying to do the best we can.
It's true. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
You're awesome. Yes. Yeah, there's nothing that you can't forgive. It's a choice. It truly is a choice. And it is the key to freedom. For everyone that you hold a grudge against, a judgment against, it actually is restricting you from becoming the person you were meant to be. So today, I invite you to consider forgiveness. I invite you to surrender the judgment, to let go. I invite you to open your heart and let love in, and let love flow to others. Truly, this is one of the greatest secrets of waking up to our full potential. Please visit me on my website at nanice.com. That's NANICE.com. And there's tons of free articles. All my shows are archived there. Free book download, song downloads. It's just a feast of enlightenment. And while you're there, make sure to take the pledge. It is truly a guide to becoming who you really are in no time at all. And let me know what you'd like to hear on the show. Let me know who you are. Contact me. You can email me from my website, and I really want to know you. Thank you for being here with us today. You are loved. You've been listening to Chai with Nanice. Bye for now.
Thank you for having Chai with Nanice. Please go to www.nanice.com for great free stuff that will empower you to live your best possible life. Free books, articles, shows, meditation audios, and so much more at nanice.com. That's Nanice.com. Nanice's books are also available in all major bookstores and Amazon. Check out The Infinite Power of You, Even Gandhi Got Hungry and Buddha Got Mad, Zest Point, Lip Prints, and many others by Nanice Ellis. To find out about one-on-one coaching and how Nanice can personally coach you to experience your best life possible, please email mybestlife@nanice.com.
If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And please join me on my website at nanice.com. That's Nanice.com. Thank you.